this is a great model available at a great price, and I'm really glad that I now have one to run on Weir Yard. Hey there, so great to see you, and I hope you are well. I'm Jenny Kirk and this is Weir Yard. Today we're going to be looking at a bargain that I've come across, and everybody loves a bargain. Certainly in these chastened times it's really great to pick up a model at a really great price. And I've been looking at the model centre and I was made aware that they had found in their warehouse a whole load of the Hornby 5-car APTs and were selling them off to clear the space at a really great knockdown price of £299.99, which is certainly the best price that I have seen on these. Now I must admit that the APT was a model which when it first came out I wasn't really all that interested in, and it's nothing to do with the model itself. I must admit I haven't even got a HST up here. It's just that kind of thing wasn't really in my wheelhouse, but at that knockdown price I really did find myself getting interested. It's in the magic livery, Intercity, and you can't knock something that's in Intercity livery, can you? And at that great price, what's not to like? So I thought I'd give it a go, and let's take a look and see, is the Hornby APT at £299.99 a bargain worth getting? Come with me in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCT decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support comes from...
This is Clark Railworks and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest logo.
I have to say, it comes in a really big box. You can see it there behind me, and it really does feel quite substantial. So let's get on and take a look. Is this a bargain that you need to have? At the moment there's some really great deals and bargains to be had, and one that really caught my eye was TMC have announced that they're having a bit of a warehouse clear out, and one of the items is the Hornby APT Class 370. This comes in quite a large box. I've got my rostrum camera wound up quite far and I can't fit all of the box on camera at the same time, but I did get a photo of the box so you can see just how massive this package is that you're getting for what is actually a great knockdown price. And it's like we've said before with some of these bargains, when they're gone, and we're not going to see these reappear at these sort of prices ever again, would be my guess. This particular set, we've got R3873, and this is the one that TMC have in their deal at the moment. And this box contains a full 5-car train pack. And with the aid of some of the other coaching packs, it's possible to make this up into a 7-car or even a 14-car train, although you will need quite a large layout for that. And all of these are sold separately, and I have actually seen some of these around at a really great price. So picking up the APT 5-car box set opens the door to also grab some of these whilst they're on offer out there. The box itself is huge, and I'm just going to figure out a way to get into here, and it feels a lot more like we're actually getting some kind of an actual set. It is that big. So I'm just going to slide out the first of the trays. It's just taken the protective card from the top. There is a second tray in here as well, and there's also some paperwork which does give a little bit of information in terms of putting this together. And also we've got some information on maintenance and DCC fitting. One of the things to note about this is that it does require on DCC 3 decoders to be able to get all the lighting functions to work. And if you're thinking 3 decoders, that's a bit excessive, I will explain. You've got your motor coach in the center, so that obviously needs a decoder, but then you need 2 function-only decoders, one at either end, for the directional lights to be able to function, and that's why it needs 3 decoders. But we've got a link down below that takes you to tramfabrique.co.uk, and they have some specific function-only decoders for around the £14–15 mark, and it's an ideal way of getting a quality function-only decoder. But be warned, they can't be used to activate and run motors. They are specifically for this kind of application. You will need a single regular decoder to be able to power the motor in this. We've also got some information about some of the formations of the 5, which is in this box, the 7 coach train and the 14 coach train. So we will be visiting that as we go through this. I have to say, one of the things which I did notice is that we don't have too much in the way of plastic packaging. This is all recycled card, and kudos to Hornby for going in that direction. So in this first tray, we've got one of the inner coaches that goes up against the power car. And these have articulated bogies, a bit like the quad or quinart sets. And it was a way of being able to cut down on the weight on these trains. By having them share bogies, it meant there were less wheels needed, less bogies, which are really quite heavy. And it also meant that the tilting mechanism on the corners would work pretty well. Looking at these, we've got a representation of that tilting mechanism, and this is one of the lead cars. We've got the hatch underneath here, which is where the decoder will go, the function-only decoder, but more about that later in the video. The actual printing on these is very, very striking. And if you were a member of the Rail Riders back in the day, you'd recognise this as being part of the logo of that British Rail Club. The application of the livery on these is nice and sharp, and what it does show up as well, that we've got a wealth of separate details like these etched grills, and you can see there's some detail in there underneath. It really is quite nice. Looking at the cab, we've got the full representation of the cab interior, and hopefully that will show up under our photography later on. It's a little bit difficult to show you under the studio lights. We've also got that really quite sleek and mean streamlined nose, and the unit number of this as 370003, which was its number on tops. The actual shape of the coaches is actually quite reminiscent to the Mark IVs, which were built with an idea that they would be converted for tilting, although that never actually happened, and we didn't actually see tilting trains until we got such as the Virgin Pendolinos, which finally employed the technology to be able to increase the speed that they could travel at without needing the upgrade of the infrastructure. The windows do have a slight tint to them. I quite like it. It looks really quite realistic. Inside I can also see that we've got a full interior, although we don't get any passengers in them, but certainly if you wanted to take on a detailing project, that is definitely something which could be undertaken. The actual bogies themselves fit together with this ball joint, which gives a huge degree of movement, including side to side for the tilting mechanism. We have pickups on all wheels so that we shouldn't be getting any kind of a flicker with any of the lighting effects, and we still have quite free running metal wheels to contend with there. There's no couplings on the outer edge. These can only be run with other APT type coaching stock, and that's just simply because that's the way that they would have always run. The next coach in on the train has the single bogie with the pickups on for the lighting in this coach. These inner coaches potentially have a little bit of a setback in that they're only picking up from that four-wheel bogie, but we will see on the track just how well that performs. The livery application on these is slightly different. We've got this stripe, which was part of the livery, and you can see that we've got the different layout internally, which is prototypically accurate. On this rear bogie, we've also got this coupling bar which connects it to the actual motor car, but we will be taking a look at that in a moment. When it comes to putting the train together, what I do like about these is that we don't end up with a string of sausages, which is something that we've grown accustomed to with some of the other DMUs and EMUs that come with multiple coaches. The coach just rests on that ball joint. You can see that we've got the perfect height on there, and it does actually hold it quite firmly. That's not going to bounce off on the track, but if we want to take it off, that is quite easy. The other end of the train, we've got a duplicate of the driving cab, but you can see here that this has the TOPS number 370004, and this is not just a duplicate of the one we've already seen, but this is accurately numbered and lettered for its compatriot. Again, we've got that flush tinted glazing. I do like that. That glazing effect with the tint really does look nice. And the livery itself with this adapted Intercity Executive really is quite striking. Let's take a look at the rest of the APT train. Again, we get the card tray. We have another one of these inner coaches, and that again, just to match up with this, we've got the same design, but we've got a different running number, so 48603 and 48604. I also do like a lot of the detail on the bogies. It has to be said that we've got the suspension with these great big rubber grommet type arrangements that provide part of the sprung suspension and gave these quite a smooth ride. There's lots of separately applied and decorated detail, and we've also got some lettering on here, which would be quite interesting to see what that says under very, very close magnification. Again, a lot of lateral movement. These do have a lot of flexibility for when it's running, and we've got, again, the pickups on all wheels. And looking at that, these do make a very positive contact on all wheels without any real need to adjust anything. The final part of this set is the actual motor coach. On the real trains, these were something that it wasn't possible to walk through. The reason for this was that the magnetic field that was generated by these was something that was deemed not really a great thing to expose passengers to. So effectively, the train was in two halves. There's plenty of weight to this motor coach, and we've got the roof detail on here with the bus bars, which are actually quite sturdy. Going down here, the insulators. There's a lot of detail on this roof, some etched grills, and interesting touches. We've got these roof skylights. Of course, there's no windows on the side, so we get this really nice sleek side panel on what is effectively the locomotive, but I'm guessing for maintenance purposes it made sense to have some kind of skylights just to let something in. One thing that's really quite interesting, you can see there that the pantograph is connected to the bogie itself, and this would be so that when the train tilts, the pantograph remains in proper contact with the overhead line equipment, and this is as per the prototype. I also like that we've got these separate, in fact actually they're not separate, I'm looking at those, they look like they're separate handrails, but it's very carefully decorated relief detail, and it just shows that sometimes you don't need extra added detail for the sake of it, when carefully designed printing and relief will do the job, and certainly it's a great way of keeping the production costs of these down. The pantograph itself is posable, and you just see there that with assembly of springs it can be posed in the upright position, although it should be noted that this is made of plastic rather than metal. It's purely decorative and non-functional, and whilst it does seem to be fairly strong, I don't want to put it to the test, and you should be mindful that as a plastic detail part, it may be worth just being a little bit careful when posing this in the upright position. To get it to go all the way back down, we just gently push and it clips into place. The plastic moulding is really quite sharp on this, and we get a lot of the detail of the pantograph, and in particular the pantograph head is very fine, much finer than what we've seen with metal pantographs on other models. We also have the really quite interesting arrangement that the pantograph sits on with the isolators and the framework that goes up through the power car. We've got on here the running number SC49003. On longer trains they actually had two of these power units set up in the centre, again dividing the APT into two distinct parts, and that was probably one of the problems that they faced with putting this into frontline service. This particular model is named as City of Derby. We've got a really nicely printed crest on the side, but in the additional detail bags we also get some really nice etched plates as well. So if you wish to, you can apply these with just a tiny dab of PVA, and using PVA is preferable because it gives you plenty of time to be able to locate it. It's easily wiped off without damaging the finish, and if for whatever reason you ever need to remove these, it's very easy to remove the PVA, again without damaging the finish. We've also got a number of these spare drawbars to connect the motor coach to the next coaches in line, and I'm not sure whether these are necessary if you buy any of the coach packs, or they're just very generous with giving you some spares. There's two here, and I've already spotted that down in the box we've also got a further two, so that's 4 spares over and above what we've got already on here. The rest of the printing is really nice and sharp. You can see that really quite huge BR double arrow, and again the stripes on this are crisp and clean, and on the ends we get a representation of the through connectors, and there's actually again even more of a wealth of detail, including printing and some of the connectors for the power that would go through from this to the rest of the train. When it comes to connect these up, you just have to be a little bit careful. There's kind of a two-stage approach. We have an upper and a lower connector, but they do go together fairly easily actually. I'm surprised at just how easily they go together, and that makes up the drawbar between the actual power part of the train and the adjoining coaches. And that is actually surprisingly strong and very easy to put together. In fact, I'm quite liking the design of these. It's quite simple and yet quite effective. When it comes to separating these, it's just simply a case of applying gentle pressure and pulling them apart, and they do unclip quite readily. I'm going to move now to the DCC fitting, and I've got my DCC Concepts servicing cradle here just to make sure that we don't run the risk of damaging anything. For this, what we're going to need is a jeweler's Phillips type crosshead, and it's this hatch on the underside that we need to actually carefully remove. With the screws removed, I'm just going to use a pair of tweezers, very carefully just get that to unclip itself. And down inside what we've got is Very interesting mechanism, actually. I'm just looking at this, and the entire inside of this does seem to rock as part of the tilting mechanism. And this is something that is talked about in the manual, just to be careful when you put the decoder in to make sure that there is enough room for that rocking mechanism to work. So this being the motor car, I've got a regular decoder here, the 8-pin from Trainomatic, and we've got pin 1 just marked up there, and we're going to make sure that that lines up with the orange pin. So what we need to do now is we need to make sure that this decoder can fit in and coil up the cable, tuck that neatly into place, and then we're going to refit the panel on top, just in the reverse of the process that we've already undertaken. And there we have it, really easy to DCC fit. Next up we need to fit the function only decoders in. Again, we've got these access panels in the underside of the model. Just 2 screws to remove, and very carefully remove that. And then we're going to gently maneuver out the blanking plate. With the blanking plate removed, you can see that we've got pin number 1 just there in that corner. And I'm going to be using the function only decoders from Trainomatic. I currently have 6-pin variants in stock, and this is an 8-pin model. So I'm going to be using an 8-pin to 6-pin adapter. Line that up, push that in, and then the other end of this fly lead, line that up, pin 1 to pin 1, make sure that all of the pins are aligned, and then very carefully insulate that, which I will do with a single layer of Kapton tape on, and make sure that nothing is going to short out. One thing that is apparent is that in these end cars there really isn't a huge amount of room. I'm just looking in here for a way to fit this decoder in, and whichever way I put it, it does seem to be trying to stick out a little bit. Let's try and get the hatch back on. And this is just a little bit tricky. I think it's going to be under a lot of tension. So let's just see if we can get this back in. It's just a little bit of a bulge on that, which isn't perfect, but we've got that in. The APT also features working directional lights, and this is why you need those function-only decoders in the cars at each end. As you can see, when we change direction, they change over, change back again. They are nice and bright, but unlike some of the comments I've seen online, there's no sign of any light bleed through. And this extends to the rest of the coach bodies, where the interior lights are always on. It's a shame that these couldn't have also been controlled from the auxiliary outputs of the decoders, but I understand how it would have been difficult to be able to control the lights in the intermediate cars without either having a different design of connector, which would have added to complexity and cost, or had additional function-only decoders in each coach, which may have been a step too far for the enthusiast's pocket. There's also a cab light on this model, although it isn't the brightest of lights that I've experienced, but if I turn the lights down, then you can see the cab light is able to be controlled on an additional function. What is interesting is that whilst the headlights are on and the direction is set for this to be the forwardmost cab, I can turn the cab lights on and off. But if I change the direction of the train, the cab lights now no longer work. And it's an interesting touch, and it does add a little bit of something to operation, such that you don't end up with a cab light on at both ends of the model at the same time. Whilst the train was running, I didn't experience any flickering of the lights, and as you can see in the low layout room lighting conditions, The interior lighting is really quite pleasing, with no sign of any bleed through whatsoever. These interiors too sport some pretty high detail, and I can imagine these being a really great little project to add a number of seated passengers into. The first class areas are correctly resplendent with the blue interior with the 2+1 seating arrangement, and the standard area is finished in red with the 2+2 seating arrangement. The APT model also exhibits a degree of cant as it goes around the corners, just as the prototype did. It's not excessive, and as you can see here, when pushed to the excess of a radius 1 curve, there's just enough for it to look like it's leaning without looking like it's leant too far. Whilst radius 1 is far tighter than is recommended for this model, it did go round, albeit with a slight nudge from the corridor connectors as it straightened up, but the wheels all stayed on the track. I had it running through the torture test track on Weir Yard, which includes radius 1 curves, reverse curves, and some quite steep gradients. What I found was it was not defeated by the curves, but actually the 4% gradient just seemed to be slightly too much for this single power car to be able to propel the 5-coach train up. But with a small helping hand, it actually was quite capable on the rest of the circuit once it was pushed over the summit. This model came from TMC, the Model Centre, where they're currently having a sale, and it was £299.99, so a penny under £300, and that's an amazing reduction from the £478 that they were originally available for. I must admit that the APT was a model which didn't interest me when it was announced and then when it came out, but now that I've actually seen one in the flesh, I really do quite like it. The livery application is really quite sharp, and for me, some of the highlights include the detail on these rather intriguing bogies, but also the way that it just runs faultlessly through the track here on Weir Yard. I also really like the lit up interior. It's one of the best coach lighting sets that I've seen in a ready-to-run model, and with the different interiors on display really quite crisp and clean, there's a lot of scope to load these up with passengers and maybe a little bit of embellishment with some tins of paint and a small paintbrush. You could really transform your APT set into something really special. Needing 3 decoders is something that did initially grate with me, but you can get these function decoders quite cheaply, and they do give an extra dimension to the control, and I see why Hornby have done it. To have put electrical connections through all of the couplers and the means by which the coaches sit on the articulated bogies would have been very expensive. It would have added a lot more cost to the model and a lot more complexity. And actually, the method of connecting up these coaches that they've chosen is simplicity in and of itself. And if we need 2 extra function-only decoders at around £14.75 each, then so be it. And that does mean that we get full control of the cab lights at either end, plus the directional lights, although we can't turn on or off the interior lights, and if that's going to be an issue for you on your layout, if you want this to be parked in carriage sidings without the lights illuminated, you may wish to consider setting that siding up with an isolating switch so that the power can be interrupted to the model if needed. The shape of these coaches captures the characteristics of the short-lived APT really, really well. It's got a curious shape to it that's actually really quite complex. The paint finish too is perfect. It could have looked really plastic fantastic, but Hornby have got the cream colour on these roofs perfectly done, and the subtle ribbing too, which matches that of the prototype. All in all, for me, this is a great model available at a great price, and I'm really glad that I now have one to run on Weir Yard. I've looked around and the coach packs are still available. In fact, TMC also has a number of these at £98 for a pair of coaches, and it does mean it is still possible to build one of these APTs up into the full 14 coach train if you have the layout to accommodate it. I'm not sure that I'm going to be quite that ambitious, but it is quite tempting, I must admit. So we turn now to the scores. First up is build quality, and on this it scores quite well. I found it very robust. There was nothing that came loose, none of the detailing seemed to suffer, and including these quite complex bogies, including the articulated design, did fare really well. The detailing on the top of the power unit is quite robust as well, with all of these bus bars, but where I felt a little bit concerned was the pantograph. This didn't break during the review, nor did it suffer any ill effects, but the plastic finish does really say to me that this is something that you have to treat with the greatest of respect. And for me, I would have been slightly happier if there had been more metal components within this. It's really fine and it's credibly done, but I just feel on a model such as this it would benefit from being somewhat more robust. The only other area which I could really draw fault to is the panels underneath that hide where the DCC decoders go. You can see here that we've got a bulge developing, and this is partly because there's too limited space inside to comfortably house the decoder, but also that there's a lot of flexibility in this panel, and even with the two screws it is pretty much impossible to get it to go back in and sit flush because of that flexibility. The only saving grace on this is that this is something that you're not really going to see when it's going round on your track. So I'm going to give this an 8.2. Next up is running quality. And on this front, the whole train performed reasonably well. It managed to get round almost every area of Weir Yard, including most of the torture test track, and this includes radius 1 curves, which whilst the model is not designed to go around these, I was quite pleasantly surprised to see that it could just manage it, albeit with the gangways rubbing slightly in between. It didn't manage the 4% gradient, but you've got to remember that this is in effect a 4 coaches and 1 locomotive train, and that would be taxing for most locomotives in the fleet because that is quite a steep gradient for a model locomotive. The one area where I felt that it did suffer was when it was passing through some of the more complicated point work on Weir Yard. There was a little bit of a wobble coming from some of the coaches. It wasn't a huge amount, but it just felt like it was on the verge of coming off the track at speed. It never actually did, but it was something that I did notice during the running, so I'm going to give it a 9.1. On DCC fitting and innovation, the plus points, I really like that internal lighting. That is some of the best coach internal lighting that I've ever seen in a model, and the whole train really does look good with all of that lit up, and it shows off what is actually a very nicely realised interior and gives the end user a lot of scope for some customization with a little bit of work with paints just to pick out some detail, followed by a bunch of sitting down passengers. You can really bring this train to life, and because they're nicely visible, it's not a case of just knowing that they're there, you can see that they are there, and it's really nicely done. Where for me I was just a little bit bothered was that we had to fit 3 decoders, albeit 2 of these being function decoders. The extra decoders in each end weren't too difficult to set up and do give full access to the lighting and the cab lights, and it's nice to see Hornby models that are making use of these extra functions. But I did feel that because they'd kind of dumbed down some of the connections, we lost the ability for that central DCC decoder in the power unit to control everything and have extra pickups to boot across the full length of the train, although it must be said that it didn't really need it. The 3 decoders may well make a lot of people balk just a little bit when it comes to DCC fitting, but it is quite straightforward to set up, with the end cars each being put on the programming track and being set up with exactly the same running number as the main power unit in the centre of the train. What is nice is that the whole train is set up so you don't have to fiddle with the CV29 on any of the decoders. They just match up, with one end always being the tail end whilst the other is the leading end at all times. So it wasn't too difficult to get the 3 decoders to work in unison. Overall, I thought that this was a great model, and I do understand the method chosen by Hornby to link these coaches together. It also means that it's very easy to add in extra coach packs without having to mess around with often fragile power connectors between cars. And I think, all in all, on the balance of everything, Hornby have chosen the right way to go with these, and I fully understand their approach, so I'm going to give it a 9.0. On value for money, well, the RRP at £478, let's break that down for a moment. You may think that's a lot of money to pay for a train, but that is a full train. We've got 4 coaches, plus a locomotive. Added to that, the coaches are full spec with full carriage lighting in them, pickups on the wheels, some really high fidelity bogies, and we get this power unit in the centre, which is, to all intents and purposes, a full locomotive to its own right. And when you take all that into account, the RRP is actually a fairly fair price point for what you actually get. When you add to that at the moment TMC have got them on sale for £299.99, well, you're paying nearly that for new locomotives. So, and really it's a case that whilst they're clearing out their warehouse, this is a great deal to be had. I'm going to give this an 8.5, and mostly that reflects the original RRP. At the sale price, you really are getting a good deal. And that gives us a total of 42.8, which again is a pretty respectable score, and it is a good model. When they first came out, I must admit, I just wasn't interested. But now that I've seen them available at this price, I've taken the bait, I've got one, and I'm really quite pleased with what I get for this. It's a lovely model, and I'm really actually looking forward to see what else Hornby brings out in this vein, because it is a great model. I hope you really enjoyed today's look at the Hornby APT, available from the Model Centre at £299.99, certainly the best price that I've seen them available for. And at the time of filming this, they do have quite a few in stock, so it's well worth taking a look if this is something that this video has really made you think again about getting one of these great models. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section down below as well. Is this something that you've already got? What have been your experiences with it? Or is this something that actually you've perked up and gone, what? That price? That's quite good. I'm going to get one of those. I'd love to hear from you as well. But don't forget as well to tickle that like button, share the video, and also subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. You can also head on over to Patreon and help support the channel to keep making the videos that you want to see. And of course, we've got the full merchandise store as well, where you can get yourself a t-shirt, a hoodie, or a mug with any of the great designs, including Gronk It Up, Terrier Fest, and of course Billy's replacement speakers. You too can look great in your t-shirt and hoodie, drinking from your mug. And until next time, you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model 00 gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest logo.
I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, but a special thanks go out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, Alan Dickerson, Eddie Popper, Karen Nichol, Medwin Williams, Crossways Point Junction, 3B Rail, Jennifer Horton, Michael Rose, Trains with Nick, and Simon Snow. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.